show of hands, how many of you know what this is? Don't tell me. Put your hand up if you know.
Speak up. We can't hear you.
What is it?
Put your hand up if you know what this is.
Does he mean? Yeah, he's giving.
Okay. The last thing on the program tonight.
You mean you're still testing?
Absolutely.
Just like
All right, this is the trolley parks of Northeast Ohio. In the days of streetcars and interurbans, which were electric conveyances, get people from town to town, the interurbans did a very good job. They got people out of their neighborhood. They could get from Cleveland to Elyria in a matter of an hour and a half, 2 hours, instead of horse and buggy, which would take you half a day, and then you turn around after your visit, 5 minutes, and to get back home. All right, but be that as it may, the interurbans had lots of traffic during the week. People traveling salesmen, people visiting, and on the weekends, not so much traffic. So almost universally, they seem to stumble onto the idea of generating revenue for themselves on the weekend by investing in or buying or building, not amusement parks, but in those days, which we're talking now 1890-ish, properties that were either already established as picnic groves or scenic spots or places along the lake, any lake, that they could develop and perhaps build a dance hall and generate traffic on the weekends. It was a very successful thing. And as you'll see here, there are 5 different lines, interurban lines that ran out of, connected to downtown Cleveland. One of them was did such a poor job at trying to hook up with these parks that they came into business in 1895 and went out of business in 1920. They were that distraught. So, we're not looking at amusement parks per se as such. We're looking at the start of this era at what would be picnic groves where people could come for Sunday lunch, unless there was blue laws, which there was in most places. But on Saturday, they could have baseball games. There were traveling teams. Each city, including West Park, had their own baseball team. So they would hop on the interurban and go out to Oberlin, play Oberlin. They might go to Bucyrus and play a doubleheader on Saturday, and vice versa. Bucyrus and Gallium, which are 15 minutes apart, had a heated rivalry for many, many years. All right, so there are the 5 lines that radiate out. Going up to the northeast from Cleveland, we have the CP&E, which stands for Cleveland, Painesville, and Eastern. Shortly after that, they put an addition on to Ashtabula, so it became the CP&A, Cleveland, Painesville, and very good. EOT was the Eastern Ohio traction. They went straight east to Chardon, Middlefield, and that's the line that went out very early. It was also called the maple leaf route. I want to say maple sugar, but maple leaf route, because it went through maple syrup country. And that's the only redeeming value it had. And if you've ever driven out from Cleveland, from downtown Cleveland, on Route 322, straight east to Burton, or towns out that way, you know that you go this way a lot, and this way a lot. So most of the time, they didn't have an electricity to get those early streetcars all the way up the hill and have enough electricity to apply the brakes coming down. So it was a complicated process, and that's why, that's another reason they failed so early. The NOT&L stands for the Northern Ohio Traction and Light. They went straight south out of Cleveland along Route 8, essentially, down through Akron, Canton, New Philly, and the final destination to the south was Uricksville. Pretty much straight north-south. The CS&W was went right past our door here, to the southwest. Cleveland, Southwest, and Columbus. They had two branches, one that went out west to Norwalk, one that went a little south, and then over to Ashland, Mansfield, and Bucyrus. What's Bucyrus most famous for? How about once, please, just anybody. It's famous for two things. Two things. Can you name one? What?
Brats.
Brats, German festival.
Sausage, brats.
Bratwurst. Bratwurst.
I'll bet they have a Bucyrus Bratwurst Festival.
They do every year. You're one of those. You're one of those psychotic pathetics, aren't you? That you can see into the past. You can read my mind, and that's a scary thing.
The other one?
And what's the other thing besides Bratwurst?
Timpani.
Timpani.
Timpani. Kettle drums. Copper kettle drums. One of the few places on the planet that makes them. See, you already learned something. You can go home now. The LSE is the Lakeshore Electric, which ran right along the lakeshore out through Rocky River, across the bridge, Rocky River, to grandmother's house, and then to Bay Village, Avon Lake, Lorraine, had a branch to Elyria, connected with the CSW in Elyria, eventually reaching Toledo and connections to Detroit. At the end of each of these lines, by the way, there was connections to other places. You could get on a car in downtown Cleveland and go to Chicago. It might take you a couple days, but you know you could get there. It's much quicker than walking. So. All right, most of these places were on water, usually lakes. And there's just sort of a list right here. Just cobbled this together today. All those places on Lake Erie. Not so many to the east of Cleveland, but between here and Toledo, lots and lots of, eventually became, some of them became amusement parks, some of them just remained something less. We're going to touch on all of these tonight. And there's also a few that set up in other places, scenic spots that might have been in the hilly country of Geauga County, for example, or places along rivers. First thing we ought to take a look at is what they morphed into. Between 1885 and 1900, they remained mostly just picnic groves. And they may have added canoes or rowboats that people could lease for the evening and row around and fish and play ping pong and get drunk. No, get drunk first and then play ping pong. I'm sorry. This is a first edition carousel. 1880s. Steam engines were coming into great use for lots of things. Not just locomotives on the railroads, but you can see the puffing boiler, the upright boiler there. Once a head of steam is created, there's pistons and it drives a wheel, and there's leather belts that are attached to the wheel. You can see them running underneath the carousel, and then It's a gear mechanism. It turns the entire contraption. And this guy that's standing right in front center there, that's John Gooding. He was really impressed with this. He was even more so. He stayed and watched it the whole day. At the end of the day, he was more impressed when the owner came out with a bag full of nickels that he could hardly carry. And that morphs into the whole story of Pure Springs. And we have a couple of copies tonight in case. Well, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. You all have that book already, so you know what I'm talking about. But in case you want to get one for Christmas for somebody, they're over there. They're $20. I mean, you lose it on the way home, and it's a good deal. Just came across this photo about a year ago. And it's dated 1912, and I think that's incorrect. I think this is a very, very early carousel. Why do I say that? Because they got folding chairs on the deck. Either that or this entrepreneur was really a cheapskate. And I can't exactly figure out if there's anything attached to it to make it go. Maybe the guys just get off and push. I have no idea. But these early carousels became available in the early 1880s. So the date of this, I don't think 1912 is correct, because by 1912 there was, automated, steam-driven, electrical-driven by that time actually. We're just taking a look at some of the very early amusements that would have broken into, that people would have added to their picnic groves or their dance hall spots. And the next one was a very simple giant swing. There it is. You can see it in the background. This was an early one at Euclid Beach. And they had various contraptions at the bottom. In some cases, it was just a wooden seat. This one is right in our own backyard here. This is right down at the mouth of Rocky River. And you can see clearly the tower right here. This is another variation. It looks like they're big wicker baskets, a front seat and a back seat. So it came in all variations. Then the earliest roller coasters, or variations of roller coasters, were called toboggans. And as you can see, it is very simple. It is not very high. It is not very fast. And it is pretty small. You got two people wedged in that front seat. It looks like a very narrow set of tracks there. And they didn't last long, because once people experienced this, they wanted more. That's why that premise still works at Cedar Point, because every year they go higher and faster and farther. And the higher and faster you go, the quicker you hit the ground from a greater distance. So that's why I stick to Woody's. The early ones were called toboggans. And this is one here. This is a little more sophisticated than the previous one. It's a little higher at the other end. And after that, we got into what's called a figure eight. There was a power-driven chain that hauled them up the hill, as you can see here. And it came down in a series of eights, figure eights. And they were slightly better. Another early thing was pony carts, or as you can see, the pony carts on the left, and on the right are, for older kids, they could ride a horse around the track. They couldn't control the horse because another kid would be leading it around the ring, so that would be more excitement than I could handle. Yikes. All right, so now we got a little basis established. These places are most of them are going to be close to water. What a few of the early rides are. This is the Cleveland, Painesville, and Eastern, or the Cleveland, Painesville, and Ashtabula. That's the route in detail. This is a work in progress, by the way. This is going to morph into a book at some point. Been a lot of research on this already. But Willow Beach was a significant park. This is the only picture we have of this. This was taken by my grandfather. I happened to stumble across it about a year ago in looking through the old family album, in 1922. So there's a grandstands there, and on the right, I suspect there's some sort of track. It could have been for trotters and pacers. It could have been for, I don't know, early automobiles racing around it possibly. And there is some sort of coaster in the background, so, you know, go home and dig through your old pictures. Another spot is a YMCA camp, YWCA camp, Mary L's in Madison on the Lake. It's the only picture I have of that, but I've got some descriptions that indicate that it was sort of a amusement park and campground there. We get out to the farther east to Geneva on the Lake, and that's still a going concern. It had a dance hall. They all had early dance halls. You know, in 1900, nobody broke their thumbs by tweeting and twisting and texting. And you know, the radio wasn't blaring away, and the TV wasn't off, and
There was no movies.
there was no movies. So, you know, dance halls were very, very big. And I'll show you what I mean by that in some of these pictures. This is the beach at Geneva. Cowles Creek drains into Lake Erie right through Geneva on the lake. So there was some rowboats and canoes for rent. And even as today, the Midway is not in the park so much as it is in the vendors right in town on Main Street. Which is, it still works. So, I don't
You
know.
go to Geneva on the lake on the weekend, and you almost feel like you're a teenager back in the 50s.
The 50s, you can remember back to the 50s. Yeah, me too.
That's the 1850s.
Right near the Ashtabula Harbor was Woodland Beach Park. It's actually quite a bit of photography on this one. It had an early coaster. This is a figure 8. It started in 1884, very early, and lasted until 1952. It had some early log cabins. I'm not clear as to if this is just the office or they had enough cabins for people to rent for camping. The beach, when you get out on the east side, there's more of a cliff on the beach. The west side is more flat. So you can see in the distance there the stairways that lead up to the top of the hill. And there's picnic tables up there and benches. We're looking, let's see, we are looking west towards Ashtabula Harbor. Ashtabula, like Cleveland, was a big port city. So you can see all the ore unloaders there cranking away. And Woodland Beach Park, I gleaned these two pictures out of a Street Railway Journal from 1904. It's a trade journal for electric railways. And this is a full-page ad. And right down at the bottom here, you can see they're bragging about Woodland Beach Park in Ashtabula as two of their products, a carousel and a figure 8. All right, this is the Cleveland and Eastern now. You can see, you can just guess what this is all about right here and over in here. A lot of that sort of stuff. And it goes to Chardon. Chardon is the peak of the snow belt because it's so high. And this whole right half of this map here is very greatly elevated, several hundreds of feet above the lake level. In some cases, 600 to 700 feet higher. And it has a dead end at Garrettsville down in the lower right. Its ultimate end is in Middlefield and Chardon. And the only park-like thing that they had along the line was Chesterland Caves. It's that Sharon conglomerate, which is the top capstone in Northeast Ohio. It's at the highest point. In most areas, you don't find it often because it's so high, it's been eroded away from everywhere else. Hinckley Ledges, for example, has it. Sharon Ledges. And it has lots of caves and faults and cracks. And people went to a lot of these places in the summertime to escape the heat of the city. These places were naturally cool, unlike some of the people who went there. None of you, of course. So, you know, that's the entire extent of the Cleveland and Eastern. Now, the Cleveland Southwestern and Columbus, that's our hometown baby. That's the route. Lots of stops, lots of parks. The first one, coming right out of town, is Pierce Springs. You've got that book too, right? Because we do have a couple tonight there. And they're $20 too, by the way.
A bargain at that.
And yeah, if you lose it on the way home, it's still money well spent. They had 2 dance halls. The first one lasted from 1900 to 1910. And as you've heard me talk about this one before, a magnificent edifice. You danced on the second floor, porches all around. The music would echo back and forth across the valley. You could dance out on the porch. Downstairs on the first floor was all the eating, bowling alleys, shoot pool. So you didn't have to dance the whole night, but most people went there to dance. That one burned down in 1910, so it only lasted 10 years. They built another one which was right at the front door, right at the main gate, and that one succumbed to a fire also in 1946. They built another one which is nothing more than a picnic pavilion at a concrete floor, and it wasn't much of a dance hall. The Cleveland Southwestern had an interest in it. In fact, they bought the property originally when it was just a bottled water, spring bottling water facility, and extended their line from Rocky River Drive west a mile to the edge of the valley. They put a loop in. The car in the upper right there has come around the loop, dropping people off at the ticket gate there, that little house. You can see the bottom picture. There's 2 cars unloading in the evening. Those people will walk out to the dance hall to spend the evening dancing. The other thing at Pierce Springs was the roller rink. For those of you that roller skated, I'm sure Pierce Springs was one of your main objectives. Ken Dombey sat at the organ from 1938 to 1958 when the park closed. And Gary Swillick beautifully colored that upper picture for you.
Thank you, Gary.
He's smiling over in the corner there. He also colored this Chippewa Lake picture.
Nice.
Now, Chippewa Lake was an early, that started to get organized in about 1870, which was way ahead of much of everything else. And it's the only really large natural lake in this part of Ohio, over 300 and some acres. And it's got gently slopes down to the lake, so it's easy access. The B&O Railroad built a spur into there in about 1880, as did the Southwestern, went right to the front door. If you look on the right side of the upper picture, you can see a set of tracks in front of that building and a set of tracks behind. One is the railroad, and the other is the electric interurban. The president of the B&O Railroad had a summer home right on the lake, and today it's, I think, probably my favorite restaurant, the Oaks. If you've never been there, you owe yourself the treat to go out there and sit in the evening this summer and watch the sun go down over the lake and eat your dinner. And it will be first class. So that morphed, by 1900, that morphed into an amusement park. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's an early shot on the upper right before any real major developments were built there. In the lower left, that's lots of things are going on there now, 1900, 1906. Miss Chippewa and the boat dock. Miss Chippewa was, where did they get that from? Akron Summit Park. Honestly, I don't remember this boat at all. I was there late in several times in the last few years of operation. They had those big, powerful speedboats. They were beautiful, but a chip 1 and chip 2 or something. And this is, of course, this is not the era we're talking about, but this is a nice picture of, this was taken in 1946. So that park lasted 100 years, and that's, there's not many parks that can say that. I think probably the only one you could think of offhand is Chippewa or Cedar Point. Elyria, we head a little farther west to Elyria. And right in downtown Elyria has the Black River flowing right through the middle of it. The Black River watershed is a little bit bigger than Rocky River, maybe by about 10 to 20%. And both branches, the East Branch and the West Branch, come together right in downtown Elyria, cutting through the big formations of Berea sandstone, just as the East and West branches of Rocky River cut through the same formation in Berea and Olmsted Falls. So there's a lot of very scenic spots in Cascade Park, right in downtown Elyria. And there's, as you can see, the East Branch is on the left, the West Branch is on the right, and the southwestern car is going across the bridge right there. And if you ever get a chance, if you haven't seen Cascade Park, it's worth a day trip to walk around in there. Some pretty fantastic rock formations. Now on to Mansfield. And halfway between, well, to get to Mansfield, you have to go through Ashland. And then if you get halfway between Ashland and Mansfield, you come to what is today Camp Moana. It's a church camp. Went there when I was a kid, a few years. And that pool below that little falls there is 16 feet, 7 3/4 inches deep. Any idea how I know that? It was off limits, we weren't supposed to be there, but I ran with scissors too, so what can I say? The one on the right is present day. The interurban came right down Route 42. Route 42 used to be the Cleveland to Cincinnati highway before the interstates. It would take you about a god-awful long time to get from Cleveland to Cincinnati on 42. Every little town had signal lights. Oh, it was hateful. Well, anyway, halfway between the two towns, the interurban would stop, and there'd be a carriage waiting for the passengers, and it would take them to the hotel or a cabin. And you just kind of stayed there for, they had tennis courts, and you did hiking and just kind of simple recreation, and they had a dance hall too. So you could stay there for a week or less. And then continuing on to Mansfield, you came to Luna Park. The original Luna Park opened in New York, and shortly thereafter there were 60 Luna Parks around the country. There was one in Cleveland, and there was also this one in Mansfield. The interurban didn't go there. The interurban stopped in Mansfield right at a city streetcar stop. So you could hop off the interurban, hop onto the Mansfield city car, and in about 10 minutes time you'd be at this particular park. And this one, one of their early claims to fame was that they had 10,000 incandescent bulbs. Remember now, we're at the beginning of the century. And light bulbs are something new and novel. And a place that had 10,000 light bulbs on at night, you wanted to see that. And so lots of people did that. And they advertised exactly the same way in Luna Park here in Cleveland. Only they had a lot more than 10,000, I forget the exact number. But they also had a roller rink there, so that was pretty popular. You can see the size of the crowd pointing out, no TV, no movies, dance halls, roller rinks, swimming halls. This is their early dance hall. They called them pavilions. That one burned down, and they built a new one on the right that had, was it 5,000 windows? Yeah, 5,000 windows in it. That's a lot of glass, man. That's a massive glass. You got to be careful with that. You can't say that fast. The roller coaster there was a figure eight. And figure eights didn't last too long because there was lots of innovations being made and new designs coming out every year. Willow Park in Norwalk. This is another one of those places. There's not much information on it. Had a dance hall. It obviously was pretty popular at some point. Yeah, that happened up on South Pass a couple of years ago. Welcome to Bucyrus. Sister cities, Galion and Bucyrus. They're 15 miles apart. They have similar industries, railroads. They shared a lot of things, and they're celebrating the two sisters, the arrival of the interurban to Galion and Bucyrus. And in Bucyrus was Siqueum Park, a major amusement park, and that was right at the end of the line, so Southwestern would advertise to carry people from here to the park in Bucyrus. And 4th of July at every one of these parks, you can only imagine that you were probably standing shoulder to shoulder with thousands and thousands of people. Chippewa Lake, for example, it was not unusual to have 20,000 people there. I just can't imagine 20,000. You'd be standing shoulder to shoulder all day long. There's what the whole park looks like. You see the baseball field in the middle. And this is when they set up the baseball teams in every community and traveled all over. And that was a big source of